Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 25th of the 10th month on our Creator's calendar as we comprehend it, which happens to be the first day of Hanukkah, or the dedication, or the rededication of the Hikkel back from the Hellenists and Antiochus to the truth. I highly recommend everyone to read the accounts for themselves in the books of the Maccabees and the book of Josephus, Antiquities of the Yahudim specifically. I do believe that it's also mentioned in the Wars of the Yahudim. And then you can read about the fulfillment in Daniel, where it was foretold to happen. We've covered that before, and I will share that in the description today for anyone that might want to look about it. It was a previous scripture study that we did. But that's today, the beginning of the rededication for anyone that's partaking of that, which I would encourage everyone to do, not not necessarily lighting candles and giving gifts to people, but celebrating your personal rededication is his dwelling place, the dwelling place of the Ruach, to the truth during this time that so many are falling away into the spirit, or the season of the dead, if you will. But it happens to line up today with January 4th, 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And we are continuing with our reading of the book of Exodus, or Shemot. We're actually on chapter 16, which has to do with the calendar. This is one of the proofs right from the Bible, if you will, or the scriptures, of the authenticity of the calendar that was found at Qumran. You can use the information right here, plug it in on the calendar there, and just backtrack to find out that the first day of the year is on the fourth day of the week. The fact that the days never change and the days of the year are always the exact same days of the week every year is very clearly shown in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I don't want to get too much into that, but the fact that you can see the pattern of it fit right here is one of a few witnesses in the Bible that confirm it. Another one is in his passion and what he walked out, including after he rose from the dead. And then he had the 8 days before he allowed Thomas to touch him. That was the 8 days from the Sabbath he rose on to the first fruits. And then in the evening of that day, he allowed him to touch him after he had appeared to his father. So also fitting with this calendar. But we'll go ahead and read through here, and then Father willing, we can show that real quick and see how it all fits together. This is a little bit different version from the one that we read before. It is in the Brenton Septuagint. You can get the KJV right next to it, and I don't know what all might be different here, so it's going to be new for both of us. There are significant differences when you look at the texts. I'm not saying there's anything in this particular part, but my children and I are currently rereading the Psalms from the Septuagint as we're doing our morning reading. We are reading through some wisdom literature, and we read through the Psalms. First, it's usually the Proverbs, then Sirach, Ecclesiastes, Job, the Shepherd of Hermas, and we'll repeat, right? We'll go through those regularly. And then for the Psalms, it's in the Psalms, and then you have the Thanksgiving hymns from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the apocryphal Psalms that were added, the odes and Psalms of Shalomo, and then we repeat those as well. But either way, we're rereading through the Psalms in the Septuagint version, and for some reason, they're really sticking out to me. Very significant differences that you can see in the text on occasion. And every one of them is directly pointing to things where our Mashiach was walking out with them, that was pointing out messianic fulfillments, or the things that they were doing at the very feast day that they didn't want to acknowledge. So it's rather sad, but it's another evidence of the violence done to the truth that he foretold in his own body with his people and with Rome. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. It says, and they departed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. And on the 15th day in the 2nd month, after their departure from the land of Egypt. So that's when they were traveling on that 15th day of the 2nd month, and we'll get into that in a minute. And all the congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moshe and Aharon. And the children of Israel said to them, would that we had died smitten by Yahuah in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate bread to satiety, or fullness. For you have brought us into this wilderness to slay all this congregation with hunger. And Yahuah said to Moshe, behold, I rain upon you, or I rain bread upon you out of Shamayim. And the people shall go forth, and they shall gather their daily portion for the day, that I may try them whether they will walk in my law or not. And it shall come to pass on the 6th day that they shall prepare whatsoever they have brought in, and it shall be double of what they shall have gathered for the day daily. And Moshe and Aharon said to all the congregation of the children of Yisrael, at evening you shall know that Yahuah has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, and in the morning you shall see the esteem of Yahuah, inasmuch as he hears your murmuring against Elohim. And who are we that you continue to murmur against us? Now you can count how many times they grumbled and complained during their quote unquote trials here. And then you can look at how many times Abraham was tried and he never complained, 10 times. Then you can look at how many times Yahushua was tried, 10 times it mentions in the testaments of the 12 patriarchs. And then you find here the 10 trials of the children in the wilderness, but they complain, they grumble, they murmur, and they're cut off in the wilderness and not allowed to enter into the promised land. Something to keep in mind, because that's prophetically speaking of our times where we're literally in this wilderness waiting for his coming to go bring us into the promised land, right? Exactly correlating to those times. We don't want to be grumbling during our trials right here. And Moshe said, when Yahuah gives you in the evening flesh to eat, and bread in the morning to satiety, because Yahuah has heard your murmuring, which you murmured against us. And what are we? For your murmuring is not against us, but against Elohim. And Moshe said to Aharon, say to all the congregation of the children of Yisrael, come near before Elohim, for he has heard your murmuring. And when Aharon spoke to all the children, or all the congregation of the children of Yisrael, and they turned toward the wilderness, then the esteem of Yahuah appeared in the cloud. And this would be on the Sabbath. Okay, we'll get to that in just a moment. But he just said right here that at evening you shall know that Yahuah has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, and in the morning you shall see the esteem of Yahuah. So on the 15th in the evening, they knew him. And then in the morning, this would be the 16th, they're seeing his esteem. He appeared in the cloud. And on the 16th, it says, and Yahuah spoke to Moshe, saying, I have heard the murmuring of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, towards evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be satisfied with bread, and you shall know that I am Yahuah, your Elohim. And it was evening, and quails came up and covered the camp. And here's another evidence right here, one of 2 witnesses that I'm aware of, and please, if any of you can think of more, you can let me know. But this is one of 2 witnesses in the Bible itself that show that the instructions for the Sabbath day are literally are applicable for the daytime period, because you're not supposed to be cooking, killing, or preparing food on the Sabbath. But as you'll see here, it's in the evening that they get the meat. And then in the morning, they get manna for 6 days. The sixth day is a double portion, and then that next one was a Sabbath again. This is establishing the weekly Shabbat, meaning that they got this meat right here on the Sabbath in the evening, and they ate it that night. It was not a sin for them to kill or cook after the sunset. Another witness for doing something that's prohibited is the after his resurrection, when Caiaphas and the other taught one were walking between towns. They're farther away from Yerushalayim than a Sabbath day's journey. But as evening comes and they stop at a place and they realize it's him, after sunset, they hightailed it back to Yerushalayim and told everybody, which they wouldn't have done if they couldn't have traveled that far at that time. At least that's as I comprehend that. I've shared that with others for them to see as well. I highly encourage everyone to look at that. But right here, we'll continue. It says, and it was evening, and quails came up and covered the camp. In the morning it came to pass, as the dew ceased around the camp, that behold, on the face of the wilderness was a small thing, like a white coriander seed, as frost upon the earth. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moshe said to them, and the word what is it in Hebrew is manah, right? Manah. And it says, and Moshe said to them, this, the bread which Yahuah has given you to eat. This is that which Yahuah has appointed. Gather of it each man for his family, a homer for each person, according to the number of your souls, or nefeshim. Gather each of you with his fellow lodgers. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered some much and some less, depending on each man gathered for his household. So if you had 12 in the house, you'd get more. If you had 3, you'd get less, but no one got more than they needed, right? And having measured the homer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that had gathered less had no lack. Each gathered according to the need of those who belonged to him. And Moshe said to them, let no man leave of it till the morning. But they did not hearken to Moshe, but some left of it till the morning. And it bred worms and stank, and Moshe was irritated with them. And they gathered it every morning, each man what he needed, and when the sun waxed hot, it melted. And it came to pass on the 6th day, they gathered double what was needed, 2 homers for one. And all the chiefs of the synagogue went in and reported to Moshe. Now this says synagogue right here. Right here it says the rulers of the congregation, which is the Eddah, or the Ed, it is like a witness or a testament, right? But it's also the assembled they have here, right? The crowd, or it's the ones that are witnessing. They translate that as congregation here. They put it as synagogue there. But all the chiefs of the congregation went in, or all the chiefs of the witnesses, if you want to be most accurate, right, went in and reported it to Moshe. And Moshe said to them, is not this the word which Yahuah spoke? Tomorrow, the Shabbat, a set apart rest to Yahuah. Bake that you will bake, and seethe that you will seethe, and all that is over leave to be laid by for the morrow. Now, they're trying to teach you, and he mentions it in the book of Deuteronomy, that he says, look, I fed you with manna these 40 years. following these instructions right here, that you don't get more than you need, you don't leave over any day but the Sabbath, the sixth day to the Sabbath, and to teach them obedience so that they learn that you don't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Yahuah. That was the entire point of this whole thing. And if you pay attention, he's showing them that it's his word that makes the bread stay fresh or not. It's their obedience to it that gets the benefit or not. It's very simple, but it never changes. So it says, and they left it till the morrow, or till the morning, as Moshe commanded them, and it stank not, neither was there a worm in it. And Moshe said, eat today, for today is the Sabbath to Yahuah. Not the evening beforehand, but the actual day, right? They waited until morning, the morrow, and it's the Sabbath day today. It says, it is a Sabbath to Yahuah, shall not be found in the plain. 6 days you shall gather it, and on the seventh day is a Sabbath, for there shall be none on that. And it came to pass on the seventh day, some of the people went forth to gather, and found none. And Yahuah spoke to Moshe, how long are you unwilling to hearken to my commands and my law? That's probably one of the first mentions of very, very many how longs that you can find. Um, Even our Mashiach, when he's in the flesh, he does that. How long shall I be with you, perverted and corrupt generation? How long will I have to deal with you? Right? It's a very interesting phrase, but I highly recommend everyone just find all the references throughout the Bible where he says this and see what his heart is in that matter. This is how long are you unwilling to hearken to my commands and my law? See, for Yahuah has given you this day at the Shabbat. Therefore, he has given you on the sixth day the bread of 2 days. You shall sit, each of you, in your houses. Let no one go forth from his place on the seventh day. There's people that complain about the book of Yobelim having super added commands, like no traveling, or you can't ride your horse or your donkey, or you should not be intimate with your wife, and things of that nature. And they'll say that it's adding to the text. But because it isn't directly said in that very form throughout here, people, I don't know why, but they pick it apart. But right here, he tells you, you sit at your house, you don't go out of your place. In the Ten Commandments itself, on the Sabbath, it says that you give rest to your ox and donkey, to your servant and everything. So how are you going to ride your horse and let it rest at the same time? You can't. But that's not directly word for word written, so people find reasons to cause contention and just ignore the truth. I don't recommend anyone have that kind of disposition. I'd say be careful about that and try to prove all things instead of being flippant with what we say and think. It says, and the people kept Sabbath on the seventh day. And the children of Israel called the man, or the name of it, manna. And it was as white as coriander seed, and the taste of it as a wafer with honey. I think I've mentioned it to our group here, but for anyone else that might be listening too, there's actual phenomenon of manna being given to people. I think it's like 30 years on in Africa. And it was a group of Seventh-day Adventists that would have been impoverished otherwise. And while they're in unity and keeping the tenets of truth in the Bible as they know it, they're being provided for with manna from the heavens. And they describe it as like the sweetest cake that you can ever taste. The book of, I believe it's Hokmah Shalomo, mentions that the taste is the appealing, it's the sweetness that appeals to everyone's own palate, is how you taste it. But I found it to be very interesting there. Either way, if I can find the references to the manna being rained in Africa for those people, I'll share it with you too, so you can see that. It says, "And the children of Yisrael," I already read that one, "and Moshe said, This the thing which Yahuah has commanded, fill a homer with manna, to be laid up for your generations, that they may see the bread which you ate in the wilderness, when Yahuah led you forth out of the land of Mitzrayim. And Moshe said to Aharon, Take a golden pot, and cast into it one full homer of manna, and you shall lay it up before Elohim, to be kept for your generations. As Yahuah commanded Moshe, and Aharon laid it up before the testimony to be kept. And the children of Yisrael ate manna 40 years, until they came to the land. They ate the manna, until they came to the region of Zidon, or Phoenicia. Now the homer was the 10th part of 3 measures. All right, if you give me just one moment, I'm going to show you the calendar real quick. All right, shalom, everyone. This is a rendition of the calendar found amongst the scrolls in the Zadok, or the Dead Sea Scrolls, known as the Zadok calendar, or the Qumran calendar, if you will. The blue markings right here is just one of the 3 yearly cycles of where the full moon is throughout the year. It's not relevant. It's not relevant for anything else but marking that. The part that we want to look at right here is in the 2nd month. So we'll go ahead and zoom in just for a moment. But we were just reading about how they traveled, and they got there on the 15th day in the wilderness of Sin there. And they had grumbled and they complained, and they were told that in the evening they'd know Yahuah, and in the morning they would see his esteem. And then on the next day in the morning, that would have been the 16th, they saw his esteem, and he mentioned to him, In the evening you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have bread from the Shamayim. And on the 17th day of the 2nd month, they rained manna for the first time. That is the very same day that the flood happened, when the rains started for the flood of Noah. And that is the very same day that Hua and Adam sinned in the garden. You can find both of those references directly in the book of Yobelim. But back on point, he rained down manna for 6 days. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6th. And on the 6th day, he gave them a double portion, because the next day was the Shabbat, the Sabbath to Yahuah, our Elohim. Now, these borders are for different things. I've tried to mark down anytime there's a significant event that was mentioned to be memorialized by people in Scripture. So the 14th here, this was when Adam was brought into the Garden of Eden, 33 days after he was created, right? And this was also the second Passover. This day right here was one of the deliverances that happened during the Maccabean period, as well as some other ones. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but I just want to point that out for you. Either way, you can see that the calendar, what's written right there in the book of Exodus or Shemot, perfectly fits with what is here in the calendar for its chronology of time. And you can backtrack knowing that the 16th here is a Sabbath. You can go back and find the 9th, and then the 2nd, then the 25th, 18th, 11th, and 4th, and all the way right there to the first day of the year being on the 4th day of the week. So again, this is one of the proofs that we have right in the Bible of the legitimacy of this calendar. But I highly encourage everyone to look into this more as you have time to. All right, to get back on track here, we were reading in Shemot, and we are now on chapter 17. We have a little bit longer we can go here. But you can see the people are murmuring again, which doesn't have a good ending. It says, all and all the congregation of the children of Yisrael departed from the wilderness of sin, according to their encampments, by the word of Yahuah, and they encamped in Raphidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. And the people reviled Moshe, saying, Give us water that we may drink. And Moshe said to them, Why do you revile me? And why tempt you Yahuah? And the people thirsted there for water. And there the people murmured against Moshe, saying, Why is this? Have you brought us have you brought us up out of Mitzrayim to slay us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moshe cried to Yahuah, saying, What shall I do to this people? Yet a little while, and they shall stone me. And Yahuah said to Moshe, this is all a parable too, if you think about it. They're not reviling Moshe, but Yahuah, right? And this is our Mashiach, who's the messenger Yahuah before the people, who's speaking face to face with Moshe. But he says, Go before this people and take to yourself of the elders of the people and the rod with which you smote the river. Take in your hand, and you shall go. Behold, I stand there before you on the rock in Horeb, and you shall smite the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people shall drink. And Moshe did so before the sons of Yisrael. Now, this is all a parable, but that rock being struck and the waters coming out, obvious, right? I mean, if you know who's our rock, the waters that were being poured out was the Ruach. He was signifying, he alluded to these things himself in what he'd done, right? And he called the name of that place temptation and reviling, because of the reviling of the children of Yisrael, and because they tempted Yahuah, saying, Is Yahuah among us or not? Now, I don't know if how many people see the significance of the foretelling in parable form here, but they reviled him when he came, and he says, Is he, right? Is he really the son of Elohim? Let him come down now. They mocked him, they tempted him, they reviled him. They said, if he's the son of Elohim, let him come down, or let Elohim rescue him, right? So literally foretelling the events that were going to happen in a parable here. And then you can see what happens as well. And Amalek came and fought with Yisrael in Raphidim. Amalek is a son of Edom. Edom is in spiritual form, right? The spiritual application is Rome, the papacy, who was born in the same womb, but rose up antagonistic and is persecuting his brother. And Moshe said to Yahushua, Choose out for yourself mighty men, and go forth and set the army in array against Amalek. Tomorrow, and behold, I stand on the top of the hill, and the rod of Elohim in my hand. And Yahushua did as Moshe said to him, and he went out and set the army in array against Amalek. And Moshe and Aharon and Hur went up on the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moshe lifted up his hands, Yisrael prevailed. And when he let down his hands, Amalek prevailed. But the hands of Moshe were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him. This is where they get the seat of Moshe, right? And he sat upon it, and Aharon and Hur supported his hands, one on this side and the other on that, and the hands of Moshe were supported till the going down of the sun. And Yahushua routed Amalek and all his people with the slaughter of the sword. And this is where it mentions they had the sword, but they didn't have it beforehand. They had pillaged the Egyptians after their army had been destroyed. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, Write this for a memorial in a book, and speak in the ears of Yahushua, for I will utterly blot out the memorial of Amalek from under the Shamayim. And Moshe built an altar to Yahuah, and called the name of it Yahuah my refuge. For with a secret hand Yahuah wages war upon Amalek to all generations. Now it doesn't say with a secret hand at all. It's not translated that way here at all. But um, the context, we don't really know. I don't know of anyone who's too familiar with the fulfillment of this. Amalek being completely rooted out was fulfilled in the times of Esther, when they were out of the land and being persecuted. Haman was an Amalekite, and it was his own people throughout the Persian Empire that were going to be rising up to wipe out the Yahudim. But the very thing that he sought to do to another happened to him and collectively with his people, in literal fulfillment of this foretelling by Yahuah at this time. So I highly encourage you guys to check that out. But it is the fulfillment of this in a physical form. The spiritual application has yet to be culminated with the coming of our Mashiach and the complete removal of that fourth beast, right? All right, and then this one right here, I believe, is the next section that we have a comparable, yeah, we have a comparable section in the, what's missing, excuse me, in the Masoretic text in the Septuagint, actually, but it is in the Samaritan Pentateuch, and it is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we will get to in just a moment. I went too far. Sorry. Yeah, it starts on verse 24, unless there's some before then. Okay. So it says, in Jethro, or Jethro, right? And Yothor, they have there, the Kohen of Midian, the father-in-law of Moshe, heard of all that Yahuah did to his people, Yisrael. For Yahuah brought Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. And Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe, took Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, after she had been sent away, and her two sons. The name of the one was Gresham, saying, I was a sojourner in a strange land. And the name of the second, Eliezer, saying, for the El of my father, my helper. And he has rescued me out of the hand of Pharaoh. And Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe, and his sons and his wife went forth to Moshe into the wilderness, where he camped on the mountain, or on the Mount of El. And it was told Moshe, saying, behold, your father-in-law Jethro is coming to you, and your wife, and two sons with him. And Moshe went forth to meet his father-in-law, and did him reverence, and kissed him, and they embraced each other, and he brought them into the tent. And Moshe related to his father-in-law all things that Yahuah did to Pharaoh, and all the Mitzrayites, or the Mitzrayim, for Yisrael's sake, and for all the labor that had befallen them in the way, and that Yahuah had rescued them out of the hand of Pharaoh and out of the hand of the Mitzrayim. And Jethro was amazed at all the good things which Yahuah did to them, for as much as he rescued them out of the hand of the Mitzrayites and out of the hand of Pharaoh. And Jethro said, Baruch be Yahuah, because he has rescued them out of the hand of the Mitzrayites and out of the hand of Pharaoh. Now I know that Yahuah is great above all Elohim, because of this wherein they attacked them. Meaning, because of what Yahuah did to the Egyptians, because they attacked his children, he now knows that Yahuah is great above all Elohim, right? And that was the whole purpose of why he rose Pharaoh up, to make his name great among the nations. And Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe, took whole burnt offerings and sacrifices for Elohim, for Aharon, and all the elders of Yisrael came to eat bread with the father-in-law of Moshe before Elohim. And it came to pass after the morrow that Moshe sat to judge the people, and all the people stood by Moshe from morning till evening. And Jethro, having seen all that Moshe did to the people, says, "What is this that you do to the people? Wherefore sit you alone, and all the people stand by you from morning till evening?" And Moshe says to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to seek judgment from Elohim, for whenever there is a dispute among them, and they come and they come to me, I give judgment upon each, and I teach them the ordinances of Elohim and his law." And the father-in-law of Moshe said to him, "You do not this thing rightly. You will wear away with intolerable weariness, both those and all this people, which is with you. This thing is hard. You will not be able to endure it yourself alone." Now, he had some 2 million plus people that he was leading, and everyone with a dispute was coming to him to be judged according to the law. That's what he's talking about. He's going to wear himself out and all these people waiting for it. So he's instituting something for his benefit, for the benefit of all the people here. It says, "Now then, hearken to me, and I will advise you, and Elohim shall be with you. Be you to the people in the things pertaining to Elohim, and you shall bring the matters to Elohim. And you shall testify to them the ordinances of Elohim and his law, and you shall show to them the ways in which they shall walk, and the works which they shall do. And do you look out for yourself out of all the people able men, fearing Elohim, righteous men, hating pride. And you shall set over the people princes of thousands and princes of hundreds and princes of fifties, and princes of tens." They have it translated as captains here, and they have it as rulers here, but that's Shar, Shin, Resh, which is a prince. You can look that up in the Hebrew if you want to, but it's the prince of the host of Yahuah. It's the prince of Shalom, the Shar Shalom, right? That is our Mashiach. And he's mentioning that he's making them princes because we're kings and Kohanim with our Elohim, right? It was a type here. It was fully culminated with the renewed covenant comprehension. This is, "And they shall judge the people at all times, and the too burdensome matter they shall bring to you, but they shall judge the smaller cases. So they shall relieve you and help you." And this is where we get our idea of different types of courts, along with what Shemuel was doing. He was a circuit judge, if you will, where he would go in a circuit around the encampment of the people to judge them. We have circuit judges in America for the same purpose, but these captains over thousands, for example, that became known as the Shire Reeves in England under the common law, which became the counties and sheriffs in America. But those are literally the captains or princes over 1,000. And while a county literally has more than 1,000 today, that's the very principle of where it came from under the common law and scripture into use in our government today, because we are the fulfillment of these people still carrying down those principles, although we've been plundered because we're sinning against our maker. We're following statutes or Babylonian code instead of his word. So it's all part of the truth being revealed in our times if we can take hold of it. But it says, and they shall judge the people at all times, and the too burdensome matter they shall bring to you, but they shall judge the smaller cases, so they shall relieve you and help you. If you will do if you will do this thing, Elohim shall strengthen you, and you shall be able to attend, and all this people shall come with you, or shall come with Shalom into their own place. And then this part is what is missing from the text here. And it says, so Moshe heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And then it cuts out the rest of it because they find it to be superfluous. It's literally just showing what had been mentioned there. But it says, and Moshe said to the people, I alone am not able to bear you. Yahuah your Elohim has multiplied you, and here you are today as the stars of Shamayim in multitude. There's actually men today. I literally just saw a video not too long ago with some Christian apologists trying to, I believe it was part of an excerpt from one of the newer videos from the gentleman that did the patterns of evidence. I think they have the different ones showing the Exodus is what they're talking about. And in there, a lot of the different scholars are purporting that you don't read Aleph as thousands, but as clans or families. And when you read it that way, it's not really 600,000 men, but 592 families of only 5,000 men, which is not the stars for multitude in any capacity, whatever. But millions of people would be. And the fact that you can get over 2 million people from 70 or from 75, but from 70 people is completely within the realm of possibility within a 215-year period. There's a gentleman that's a geneticist that was crunching the numbers and doing computer algorithm programs and showed that, was talking about it, and this was over 10 years ago. I'll share that video with you in the Telegram, and I'll share it in the description or comments for the video as well. It's rather interesting, but it confirms the things that we're reading and learning about. Either way, he mentions that today you are as the stars of the Shamayim in multitude. May Yahuah Elohim of your fathers make you 1,000 times more numerous than you are, and barak you as he has promised you. How can I alone bear your problems and your burdens and your complaints? Choose wise, comprehending, and knowledgeable men from among your tribes. Self-govern, right? The consent of the governed, a principle founded right here all throughout the common law, which when they asked for a king, they did it 3 times. When our Mashiach came, they rejected him 3 times. When you pick an overseer in the apostolic constitutions and the recognitions of Clement, it's done 3 times so that at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter is established. It's the principle that you're walking out, right? Right here it says, choose wise, comprehending, and knowledgeable men from among your tribes, and I will make them heads over you. And they answered and said, the thing which you have told us to do is good. And he took the heads of their tribes, wise and knowledgeable men, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s, and officers for your tribes. Then he commanded their judges, saying, hear the cases between your brethren, and judge righteously between a man and his brother, or the stranger who is with him. This is the common law. This is what everyone ought to be doing when they are a judge of their peer in this country. And anytime you judge a man according to a statute rather than the common law, and you've done something in an unlawful manner, you yourself are cursing yourself just like just like Shaul did when he did not do the judgment of our Maker over people, and he refused to kill a king that should have been under the ban. Instead of that king, he still died, but then what was supposed to happen to him happened to Shaul and his people instead, because the judgment was perverted and the judge was going to be judged accordingly. The same is true for everyone in our country. We're all kings in America, if you want to put it that way. We're all sovereign as the body politic of people. We all self-govern according to the Bible. This is what our founders established that has been perverted by the enemies of the truth, so that the enemies of the truth can have power and jurisdiction over you. It is that simple. But this is what we ought to be doing to get back to that. It says, "You shall not show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small as well as the great. You shall not be afraid in any man's presence, for the judgment is Yahuah's or Elohim's. The case that is too hard for you, bring it to me, and I will hear it." And that's the what we'd call the appeals court, or when things are beyond the jurisdiction of a common court, you go up. "And he commanded them all the things which they should do. So they judged the people at all times. The hard cases they brought to Moshe, but they judged every small case themselves. Then Moshe let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way to his own land." All right, thank you for that. I believe we have this one more chapter before we get to the 10 Commandments here, and then we might save that one for next time, but we'll read this one now. The 10 Commandments are a treat in themselves. I've shared the missing sections before, but once you see what our Mashiach, as Yahuah, the messenger that was sent before the people, what he spoke on Mount Sinai to them is pretty interesting. He even mentions the part where he's going to come and be like one unto Moshe then. But you don't see it so clearly because in the Masoretic text, that part is removed. So we'll probably see that next week, but we'll go ahead and finish this real quick. Chapter 19. And here's another interesting thing. It mentions about being set apart and not coming near your wife, okay? Because you don't want to be unclean on his appointed times. This is something about, there's another thing in the book of Yobelim about not being with your wife on the Sabbath day. If you know that the Sabbath day is a type of the millennial reign, where you're going to have men like messengers and you're not going to have that kind of thing, that's what it represents. But aside from that, right here, and later on in the law, you'll see that spilling your seed made you unclean, ritually unclean until evening, just like touching the carcass of a dead body, whether it was a man or an animal. Some animals you abominated completely at death or even while living. So there's different distinctions that could make you unclean, and you don't want to be unclean on the Sabbath. It's just common sense. But moving on. It says, "And in the 3rd month of the departure of the children of Yisrael out of the land of Mitzrayim, on the same day they came into the wilderness of Sinai." So on the 5th, right, on the 15th, or yeah, on the 15th is when they came in. "And they departed," "and they departed from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and there Yisrael encamped before the mountain. And Moshe went up to the mountain of Elohim," or the Mount of Elohim, "and Elohim called him out of the mountain, saying, These things shall you say to the house of Jacob, and you shall report them to the children of Israel. You have seen all that I have done to the Mitzriites, and I took you up as upon eagle's wings, and I brought you near to myself." This is another allusion for our purposes, taking him up on eagle's wings, bringing him out into the wilderness where we have these trials. It's allusions to us in the wilderness during our times, and the foretelling in Revelation about the woman being born by eagle's wings into the wilderness, right? There's also different foretellings about eagles in, I believe it's Ezekiel, and there's one mention, Yehezkiel, Ezekiel, and there's one in Yeshayahu, which have different allusions for purposes related to this and a contrary eagle, both worthwhile to look at. I'm mentioning everything that I can think of as well. You also have the illusion of the eagles, where the dead body are, there the eagles will be gathered together, which is an allusion to the dead body of his people, and where the eagle or the roam is uh, searching for prey, if you will. There's a lot of things that we don't have the time to get into all the time, but there's everything in creation is to teach a man wisdom. All the things that are is to teach a reasonable mind his truth. And the same is true with animals the country that you live in, for example. I'll give you two illusions and then a little story there, or two. In the ancient history of Caledonia, the indigenous species of cattle for the Caledonians or the Highlanders of Scotland was an all-white cow with a black nose and a black tongue. And if you read through the ancient history of Caledonia, you can see that these were a very highly pious people, but they had a bad habit of sniffing out some rotten stuff and not having the means of not being discretion, not showing discretion in what they say. So their mouth got them in a lot of trouble. And that's even to this day, you can find that phenomenon amongst the Caledonians or the Highlanders of Scotland that are dispersed throughout the world. In America, the heraldry, right, is the bald eagle. Foretold, we read the foretelling about them from Merlin not too long ago. There's also the illusions of the eagle I just mentioned here. But the bald eagle is indigenous to America, a white head and a brown body. Ideals that are noble and true, but a body that's totally sordid and dirty, unclean, and the animal's altogether a predator and not fit for clean uses in itself. That is typical of America to a T, whether we want to admit it or not. But it was foretold in this very animal in our country. It's just the reality of what is if we want to be reasonable and look at it. Now, a story about that. I was thinking about these things a few years ago in relation to fish in America. We have something called the trout, and the trout will the eggs will hatch in the rivers and streams of America, and they'll make their way while they're young out to sea, where they'll live their life for a few 5 to 7 years. And when they're full and when it's time for them to die, they make their way back to where they came from to lay their seed to propagate a new generation. There's so much in that to the conditions of our own country, what fish represent, and all these things. It's very amazing. But I just want to point that out very quickly as a thing to address another one of these instances in our country. But one of the things that's a unique phenomenon during this time is that after the trout, after they lay their eggs, and this is the time when most men are fishing for them in the rivers and in the tributaries and whatnot to catch them, either before or shortly after they spawn. But after they've went to the spawning beds, they've laid their eggs, and they're destined to die. There's places, especially in the area that I live, where you can go and you'll find at these river areas where the fish are coming out to die, there's like 10, 15 eagles all around there just having a feast. And I think that's very typical of the conditions that we are living in ourselves today, where those coming back to the truth, coming back to the roots of things that propagate their seed for the next generation become food for the eagles. But it's not necessarily everybody, right? And it's not always those that can successfully lay seed or not. Now, hopefully you guys can see in these parables real things that he's trying to teach men even today that are rather amazing. And you can do that with everything if you just look at it through the lens of his word and what he's saying about stuff. But back on point real quick. It says, and they departed from Raphidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and there Yisrael encamped before the mountain. I read that one, I'm sorry. He went up, I read this one too, but we'll go ahead and continue. It says, and Moshe went up to the mount of Elohim, and Elohim called him out of the mountain, saying, these things shall you say to the house of Jacob, and you shall report them to the children of Yisrael. You have seen all that I have done to the Mitzrayim, and I took you up as upon eagle's wings and brought you near to myself. And now, if you will indeed hear my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be to me a segula, a peculiar people above all nations, for the whole earth is mine, or the whole land, or the whole world is mine. Yeah, that's aretz, so that's the whole land. I mention land and not earth because when we think earth, sometimes the first picture that pops in your mind is a ball with water, and that concept is never, not once ever intended with the use of earth anywhere in these scriptures. It is always land, literally the ground under your feet. This is, and you shall be to me a royal kahuna or priesthood and a set apart nation. These words shall you speak to the children of Israel. And Moshe came and called the elders of the people, and he set before them all these words which Elohim appointed them. And all the people answered with one accord and said, all things that Elohim has spoken, we will do and hearken to. The other version says, we will hear. It says, yeah, we will do. And it says, we will hear and we will do. And Moshe reported these words to Elohim. And Yahuah said to Moshe, behold, I come to you in a pillar of a cloud, that the people may hear me speaking to you, and may believe you forever. And Moshe reported the words of the people to Yahuah. And Yahuah said to Moshe, go down and solemnly charge the people, and set them apart today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and let them be ready against the third day. For on the third day, Yahuah will descend upon Mount Sinai before all the people. And you shall separate the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves that you go not up into the mountain, nor touch any part of it. Everyone that touches the mountain shall surely die. A hand shall not touch it, for everyone that touches shall be stoned with stones or shot through with a dart, an arrow, whether beast or whether man, it shall not live. When the voices and trumpets and cloud depart from off the mountain, they shall come up on the mountain. And if you guys had watched any of the videos about this from Ron Wyatt and others, there was literally a wall or a brick, a row of stones that was put as a border for the people not to cross. It says, and Moshe went down from the mountain to the people and set them apart, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be ready for 3 days, come not near to a woman, because you couldn't be set apart and be unclean. That's right here in the Bible, another reference to the things that you ought not to do. But um, one of these days, as you see, would have been on the Sabbath. One of the things I forgot, or I'd been mistaken in, and I just remembered, it says, on the very same day that you left, on the very same day you came in. And then it was after 1, 2, 3 days, and then or the third day, 1, 2, 3, and then they appeared to him. So it was on the very same day they left, right? The fourth day of the week that they came to Sinai. And then 1, 2, 3 days they set themselves apart. And then Shavuot is when he speaks to them on the mountain. I'd forgotten that until we were just reading right here, but then I remembered that and I wanted to point it out. That particular bit of information was first shared by um, Scott Whitman, if I remember correctly. I don't know if the video is still available, but our late brother Jerry Morris had been sharing about the calendar first, and our brother Scott Whitman had done quite a few teachings where he really dug into the chronology of events in the Exodus and other things and showed how it lined up with the calendar information very well. He went even so far, this is a little more esoteric, but I can encourage, anyone can do this, and I encourage you to try. Test these things and you'll see for yourself. In the book of Yobelim, it gives you very specific dates to the year, to the day, to the month, who or to what events were happening at what point in time. If you take that calendar and that information and you line it up with the calendar for the Zadok, the list of Kohanim from the Dead Sea Scrolls and how they are meant to serve in the Hikkel, it's made in such a way as to represent how it would have been from creation. And if you take that from the beginning of creation, this is well before any of these men even existed in creation. But if you take their names and the lists of when they were supposed to serve, and you go through the book of Yobelim, you find out what Kohen would have been serving at that time theoretically, his name's foretelling significant things about the event every single time. He went so far as to show the significance of numbers as well as the meaning of the Kohen's name and how it was all showing stuff. I won't go so far into that as he did because I'm not an expert on that, and gematria or numbers is not something that I'm very comfortable with. I do know that there's significance in numbers and what they represent in scripture, and anything that shows stuff that's right from scripture, I have no problems with. But if it goes beyond that, you can see I don't go beyond what we can prove with what's written if I the best of my ability. But the point is, you can take the literal names of the Kohanim, and who would have been serving the list of 24. You go look at what their name means, and then it's significant with the event that's going on. And he shows countless examples in the video that he made of that happening. A couple of videos. I thought it was amazing stuff. So I recommend if you can find them. They were on Jerry Morris's videos. Brother Scott Whitman might have made other videos somewhere else showing that stuff. I don't know. But they are rather significant. And I just remembered where I got that information from. So thank you for that. And he said to the people, be ready, and for 3 days come not near to a woman. And it came to pass on the third day, as the morning drew nigh, there were voices and lightnings and a dark cloud on Mount Sinai. These are significant because of what we have in Revelation as well. I highly recommend you go through the Antichrist for Dummies and you can see the parallels there. But there's a lot more involved with the voices and the thunders and the trumpet sounds, including with phenomenon that we hear today. But that's for another time. It says, and the voice of the trumpet sounded loud, and all the people in the camp trembled. And Moshe led the people forth out of the camp to meet Elohim, and they stood under the camp, or stood by under the camp. And, sorry, the Mount of Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because Elohim had descended upon it in fire, and the smoke went up as the smoke of a furnace, and the people were exceedingly amazed. Other descriptions of this, you can look at Mount Sinai. It's Jabal al-Lawz is what it's called, or the Mountain of the Law in Arabic, because that's where Moshe got the laws, where they think. And the whole top of it's black. It's all been burnt. It's melted. You can chip pieces off and see that it's colored regularly underneath it, but it is literally black over the whole top of that mountain. It was all burning. And this fire pillar would have went straight right up into you couldn't see where it goes up into the distance, but it would have went straight up into the firmament, as far as I know. And that was an amazing thing for these people. It was supposed to be so awe-inspiring that they would believe Moshe forever. And it's something that they carried down even to the days of our Mashiach. You got to say that it didn't have that effect on them. It says, and the sounds of the trumpet were waxing very much louder. Moshe spoke, and Elohim answered him with a voice. And Yahuah came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain. This is our Mashiach. The Father, no man has ever seen. He has no form. He cannot be diminished. He's Ruach. But our Mashiach is the completeness of Elohim bodily, finite, one place. There is a difference between them. And this is why our Mashiach says the Father is greater. There's obvious reasons for that. But I'm trying to point out the one that came down on Mount Sinai was our Mashiach. And in the course of time, his believers, and even he, will make this abundantly clear to everyone if you just follow along with what's plainly in the text. It says, and Yahuah came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and Yahuah called Moshe to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up. And Elohim spoke to Moshe, saying, go down and solemnly charge the people, lest at any time they draw nigh to Elohim to gaze, and a multitude of them fall. And let the Kohanim that draw near to Yahuah Elohim set themselves apart, lest he destroy some of them. And Moshe said to Elohim, the people will not be able to approach to the Mount of Sinai, for you have solemnly charged us, saying, set bounds to the mountain and set it apart. And that's the border stones that I mentioned. They still have them there, or had them. And Yahuah said to him, go descend and come up, you and Aharon with you, but let not the Kohanim and the people force their way to come up to Elohim, lest Yahuah destroy some of them. And Moshe went down to the people and spoke to them. All right. God willing, that was edifying for everyone, and you all can let me know what you think in the comments. But until next week, you guys have a great, Shavua Tov, great week ahead, a great Sabbath, Shabbat Shalom, and we will see you next time.